Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. Welcome to the show, whether you're watching us tonight live or if you're listening to the podcast later on, or if you're watching this vodcast later on live. We're really, really glad that you're here with us. And George Dismukes has something to say already. Oh, I can't see it. Okay, there you go.
Hi, George.
All right, George says, okay, first of all, I would just like to say that I am as green as a jalapeno with envy, because I would like to make the New York Times bestseller list too.
Wow.
Yes, I know.
Maybe someday, George.
That's what we all aspire to, and Anne has done it. Yes, that he's referring to our guest tonight, Anne Hillerman.
Right.
She is a New York Times on the New York Times bestseller list. And Chris Chrisman says,
hi, Chris.
Good evening, all. Hi, Chris. Glad you're here.
Marjorie
Daring. Hi. Hello. And Joe Conjal. Hi, Rob and Joan.
Joe.
Exciting show tonight. It is an exciting show. And instead of, well, you go ahead and say what you need to say. I almost jumped the gun and brought her on already.
My goodness. Okay.
I'm not excited.
No.
You're excited.
Okay. As usual, Voice of Indie podcast right after ours on blogtalkradio.com. Post Beam Weeks and Stephen Gary G's. Right after our show, of course. The guests tonight are Marcia Fox, former NASA employee and science fiction author, and Pete Rising Sun. He's an author and a shaman and a member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. So that should be a very interesting show. Mm-hmm. Episode rewind this Saturday, right where you're watching right now. Tune in exactly where you are right now. 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday, will be actually Gary G's from the Voice of Indie.
That's funny.
If you want to, if you didn't catch that one, that's going to be playing then. And then next Wednesday, November 9th, pre-recorded new episode, because we're going to be traveling again. A little short trip. With Canadian, it's pre-recorded new episode with a Canadian author, Tom Stewart. He wrote The Immortal North and Under Big-Hearted Skies. And he should be pretty interesting. He was very interesting because we already recorded that. I'm sure you'll find him interesting. He worked as a fishing and hunting guide, an oil rig roughneck, a bush pilot, and he backpacked internationally in the off seasons on his time off. And he's from Canada, Vancouver Island. Very interesting young man.
And this is the first podcast he's ever done.
It
so
is.
We're really honored that he chose us to be.
That's right. That's right. So,
Yes.
would you like to
Yes,
introduce our
without
guest?
further ado, we need to bring on Anne Hillerman. Hi, Anne.
Hello, Anne.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Robin Joan. Thanks for giving me this chance to talk.
Oh, thank you for being on the show.
We're delighted to have you. How are things in Arizona tonight?
Lovely, lovely. In the 70s. Yeah, no snow in sight.
No snow. That's always good, I think. Unless you like snow.
Was there snow in Santa Fe before you left?
Yes, the mountains have snow, and there's snow expected tomorrow. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm in Arizona. I just did a talk at a retirement center, and I'm going to be here for a while, and then I'm leaving for Santa Fe tomorrow. So busy times. I'm glad we were able to squeeze in this podcast.
I am too. Why don't you tell people how you got started writing? You might want to mention who your father is, and because he's one of my favorite authors, which everyone who watches the show all the time knows.
Well, sure. I love to tell this story. So let's see. I guess I got started writing like a lot of people in school. I was the high school reporter for the Albuquerque Journal when they did a high school page, and then I went to college and got a degree in journalism. And I think what inspired me to go into journalism was my dad. When I was growing up, my dad is Tony Hillerman, and he's best known for his Jim Chee, Joe Leaphorn mysteries. But when I was growing up, he was a newspaper reporter and editor. And I could see how much he really loved that job. He was just, he would come home after a hard day at work, and instead of just kind of vegging out in front of the TV, he was always full of stories, maybe stories about incidents that he'd covered, or stories about the reporters that he worked with, and how some of them were becoming good writers. And anyway, that inspired me to go into journalism. So I got a degree in journalism, and I did that, probably off for 20 years, full time. And then when my son was born, part time. And I loved every minute of it. Well, almost every minute of it. Everybody has bad days, but I just felt so lucky to be able to make a living as a writer. And meanwhile, my dad was teaching journalism at the University of New Mexico, and his career as a fiction writer was taking off. So eventually he stopped teaching and went to writing full time. Well, I could tell he lived in Albuquerque with my mom, and my husband and I lived in Santa Fe, but I would go down to see him probably once a week, or at least a couple times a month. And I could tell that as much as he loved writing and loved being able to focus just on his books, he was getting he was missing students and missing teaching. He had really loved teaching. So my business partner and I had the idea of starting we called it the Tony Hillerman Conference. It was basically a conference for people. Part of it was about the craft of writing, and part of it was about the business of writing. And so I talked to my dad, and I said, "What would you think about joining us for this?" And he said, "Well, do I have to do any work?" I said, "No, you don't have to do any work. Jean and I will do all the work. You just have to show up and, talk to people." And so we did that. I think he was probably our guest for 3 or 4 years. Wow. And at the time, I had done some nonfiction books, but I was not thinking of writing novels. But because we were trying to appeal to a broad audience, we had a lot of fiction writers who would come as our faculty members. And they would often talk about how to build good characters, how to enhance suspense, how to keep a story flowing, what kind of tools you needed if you were writing a series. We focused the conference on mysteries, since that was, the field that my dad was best known in. And really, mysteries are the genre that's probably next to romance are the best sellers. So anyway, I'm listening to all of this as the conference organizer, and I'm thinking it's kind of interesting, but that I don't really think it's going to have any great relevance to me. Well, then my dad dies. And at this point, I had talked to him earlier about doing a nonfiction book, called Tony Hillerman's Landscape on the Road with Chi and Leaphorn. And it was a book of photos of the places on the Navajo Nation that he had written about, places that really spoke to him. So my late husband, who was a professional photographer, joined me on this project. And we spent, probably a couple years driving through the Navajo Nation, he would get the photos, I would talk to people. And of course, before I could do this book, I had the joy of rereading all of my dad's novels. So, because I wanted to go to those places where Jim Chi or Joe Leaphorn have to pull off the road because the sunset is so magnificent, or because it's snowing so hard they can't see the height, whatever. All of those great sights that my father was so good at describing. So anyway, when Dad died, this book was at the publisher. It was about ready to be released. So the book came out, and Don and I went on a little book tour. Luckily, there are lots of places who are looking for free speakers. So we went to libraries and Rotary clubs and book clubs, not so much book clubs, but anyway, women's groups, whatever, places like that. Right. And it was good because it really made me more confident as a public speaker. I had never done any of that. But the other thing that was really, really important to me, my husband Don and I would be talking about our book and, how the adventures we'd had on the road. And then I would always ask if anybody in the audience had any questions. And inevitably, first, second, or third question would be, so did your dad have any Jim Chi, Joe Leaphorn mysteries that were almost ready to be published? Yeah. Anything in his computer, anything maybe an editor could dust off, that question. And every time I gave the talk, I got that question. And the answer was always no. I mean, Dad really took care of business before he died. So then the person, I saw this so many times, the person asking the question would get a big frown. And then that person would say, well, sometimes they'd say, are you sure? I'd say, yeah, I'm sure. And then they'd say, well, I guess I'm just going to have to reread the whole series again. And sometimes they'd say, oh, I love those characters. I felt like they were family, you know, all that stuff. So eventually, all of this time, I'm really missing my dad. I'm going through the beginning of the mourning process. And suddenly it dawns on me, I'm also, just like these readers, going to miss these characters. I had basically grown up hearing my dad talk about Jim Chi and Joe Leaphorn. I'm the eldest of six kids. And so at the dinner table, we would, go around and everybody would talk about how their day was. And when it got to my dad, often he would say, oh, I'm having a hard time with Jim today. And we go, oh yeah, Jim Chi, our cousin Jim. So anyway, I thought, as much as I miss my dad, maybe I can do something about not having to miss these characters so much. So that was kind of the impetus, I guess, that led me to write my first novel, Spider-Woman's Daughter. And when we were doing those conferences, sometimes other writers at the conference would pull me aside and they'd say, your father isn't going to be able to write this series forever. Have you ever thought about, collaborating with him, talking to him about, maybe doing some co-writing or doing the research for him? And I hadn't. I mean, it always seemed to me that was my dad's territory. And I mean, he never brought it up either. I think we kind of agreed on that point. So anyway, it's like hearing that from other writers also gave me a little impetus to think maybe I could make the switch from nonfiction to fiction.
Well, let me read some of your comments here and the questions, Anne, because they agree with whoever was, in any of those talks. Chris Chrisman said, I read most of your dad's books. Glad you're continuing the series, as am I. And he says they are such great characters, and they are. Mm-hmm. And we know all of these people making these comments, they're all authors, so they understand Jim Chi being a real person to you and to your dad, because we all feel that way about our characters. So Joe Conjal says, hi, Anne, what is your favorite book written by your dad and why?
Oh, Joe, that's a hard question. Oh, at the moment, I think it's The Thief of Time. That was the book that kind of, I guess that I used as the basis of my inspiration for Spider-Woman's Daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love that setting at Chaco Canyon.
Yeah.
And also, I love the poignancy. This is the book where Joe Leaphorn had a wife, Emma, who actually Dad always just uses as kind of a minor character. I don't think she says 3 or 4 words in all of his books.
You're
but
right.
in Thief of Time, Emma is dead. And that's where Dad really shows readers how much she meant to Joe Leaphorn.
Uh-huh.
And I've just found that so touching. And in some ways, that relationship kind of reminded me of my parents' own marriage. So I think those are at least 2 reasons that I really love that Thief of Time book. And then there's a wonderful, wonderful scene in there where Joe Leaphorn is on the San Juan River and he pulls over to a site where he thinks this missing woman is, and he hears these frogs. And then eventually he finds out that this crazy guy has done something bizarre with them. I don't want to say too much in case people haven't read the book.
Yeah,
but
no
it's
spoilers.
Really, that book has a lot of lovely scenes. And I don't know, it's among my favorites. I also love Dance Hall of the Dead. That was the second book that my dad wrote. And it's a book where Joe Leaphorn is the main character. In his first book, Joe is kind of a sidekick to this Navajo anthropologist. Anglo anthropologist. Right. So, yeah. Anyway, I like that book too. That book is set at Zuni Pueblo.
I really, you know that Joe Leaphorn's wife is very important to him. You get that from your dad's writing, but you're right. She did not have a lot to say in the book. However, in the TV series that they based on your dad, the newest one, now he's had quite a few, the latest one on AMC, Dark Wind, Emma has a much bigger part, doesn't she?
Yeah, they brought her back from the dead, gave her a job.
Wow.
I have to say, I really like what they've done with her. I do get emails from some of Dad's avid readers, and they think that the movie should be just like the books. But I think that they were wise, really, to make, in the Dark Wind series, AMC produced it. I think they were wise to make the changes they did. I mean, it often seemed to me that Emma Leaphorn could have been a bigger character. Yeah. You know, my dad felt uneasy writing about women. He said that to me several times. And I mean, I don't really understand it. You know, he was married. He and my mom were married for more than 50 years. And, you know, he had his own mother was a very powerful woman, and he had a big sister who I'm sure, you know, told him what to do and how to do it. And then he had 3 daughters. So you would think, you know, I don't know, maybe we all intimidated him. I don't know.
Well, anyway, that brings us to another point that I really like about you carrying it on. First of all, you're true to the characters. They're real. Those characters were real to me. I've read every one of your dad's books and your books. And you just carried it on seamlessly. However, we get much more of the perspective of Bernadette Manuelito, which I really like. And I can tell that, but you haven't changed her character or Jim Cheese or Joe Leaphorn's. They are still themselves. They're still the people that we love, but we just hear from her a lot more. And I like that.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, you know, when I thought about trying to write a mystery, I knew I could never be Tony Hillerman. So I thought I have to think of some way to be true to the characters Dad has already created, and true to the themes of the story and basically the ethics of the story, but change them up a little bit so I can give it my own voice. Yeah. And luckily, Dad had created Bernie, but he never really used her, I thought, to her full potential. So, yeah, that was a real gift that I hadn't expected when I was reading the books. But then when I thought about writing them, it came to me that I could give her a bigger role.
And she does have a bigger role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to pause
for a word from our sponsor.
A little word from our sponsor here, or a couple of words from our sponsor.
We'll be
Several
right back.
words from our sponsor. And we'll be right back.
Nobody
go away, guys.
We'll get you.
Welcome to Magnolia Bluff, Texas, a small town in the heart of the Texas Hill Country near Burnett Reservoir. A town where everyone's business is discussed at the local coffee shop. A town where neighbors look out for each other. A town not insulated from murder and mayhem. Which begs these questions. Who is responsible for breaking into quaint Victorian homes? And how are poodles, ghosts, drug cartels, and a Ponzi scheme connected with a serial killer? Caroline McCluskey, the town's librarian, catalogs books using the Dewey Decimal System. When a black and white poodle puppy arrives unannounced, she calls him Dewey. Now, Caroline must catalog events to identify a serial killer in her town. Pick up your copy of the Dewey Decimal Dilemma, now available on Amazon.
They thought the siren was dead. In the novel Siren Song by author George Dismukes, James Harmon shot her twice. Several people saw her dead body sinking slowly into the abyss. But now, in Siren Song 2, evidence suggests that she may still be alive.
She killed that boatload of people. It was her! And she's just getting started!
Angie, that's impossible.
The cold chill up my spine tells me it's not impossible. We've got to start all over again. And this time, do it right.
Siren Song 2. The story continues. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Get your copy today.
At Indie Book Source, you can shop by genre or by author, and you will be buying direct from the author's main purchase link. We offer hundreds of titles in formats that include ebooks, paperback, hardbound, and audiobook. Support an indie author. Visit indiebooksource.com today.
And we're back.
So Chris Chrisman was just made a comment about what we were just talking about. He said it's like looking at the character's story from another point of view. That's true.
Yeah.
Conchal said, did you or your agent have to convince the publisher that you were the best person to carry on your dad's series, or were they all in immediately?
I think they were in immediately. The first person I had to convince was my mother, because she was my dad's first editor. She was like the godmother of those characters. And I mentioned my idea to her, and she said, yeah, sure, give it a try. And so then I guess I'd worked on the first novel for a couple months, and it dawned on me that maybe there were some copyright issues with these characters and with my dad's publisher, HarperCollins. Luckily, I had met Dad's editor at some kind of a banquet when he got an award, and I was tagging along. Anyway, so I called her and I said, so I've got this crazy idea of continuing this series, and I explained a little bit to her. And she said, oh, sure, there's no problem with copyright. And then she said, and this made my heart beat faster, she said, when you're done, I'd be glad to take a look at it. So yeah, so I didn't have to persuade them. I don't know if they really had even considered having someone else take over the series. I know now you see that quite a bit with best-selling authors, that they kind of bring in somebody new and they work together for a while, and then when that person passes on, it's the so-and-so stories as told by so-and-so. But no, Dad and I never talked about it, like I said. So yeah, of course, that was 10 years ago. I think things may be a little different now with best-selling authors and prodigies, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, your first book was published in 2013. Chris Chrisman says, so really it was seamless for you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, except for doing all the work.
Yeah.
I had never written a novel. So basically I was teaching myself how to write a novel by writing a novel. And there were a lot of things that should never have gotten written that ended up being deleted. But I don't know. It was kind of nice to have it. I mean, instead of so many first novelists who just are writing it for their own pleasure, with the dream that maybe someday it'll be published, it was different for me because I had a feeling if I did a half decent job, it would be published. And then I had the anxiety of thinking, oh my gosh, my dad has been teaching these readers how to appreciate a good mystery for probably, 50 years or 40 years. And so here I am writing my first novel, basically inheriting potential readers, but also potential readers who aren't like, my best friends and my high school roommate, but total strangers who've been reading my dad's stuff for a long time. So there was a little anxiety, I'd say, about all of this. I'm glad it worked out the way it did, but I figured if I blew it, I would get about 15 pages, and then the person reading the book would just toss it in the garbage, and then tell their friends that it was awful.
Chris Chrisman said fans would kill you if you got it wrong. It's true. Oh, I had a funny conversation. I did it wasn't a Zoom, it was more like a radio thing or a phone thing with the Toronto Men's Detective Fiction Club. And so these guys have a lot of good questions. And then one of them says to me, well, I noticed that there's not a lot of sex in your books. And, by the way, your characters are married. And he kind of leaves it at that. And I said to him, well, yeah, but a lot of my readers would probably have a big heart attack if Bernie Manuelito appeared in a negligee or, it was all part of sort of the standard that my dad had set. And there's not a lot of sex in your dad's books. I've read every one of them, and I can attest that you are running true to form and doing a great job.
Well, there is a kiss. Spider-Woman's daughter, that was the first kiss.
Yes.
In a book. And now there's even talk of a baby, so who knows?
I'm so excited. Well, actually, Marjorie Deering had a question. She said, okay, the new book that is coming out in 2023 is The Way of the Bear. And she said, would you like to tease all of us with some information on your upcoming 2023 release, Anne?
Well, sure. Now, this is the first time I've talked about this book, so I probably will, I don't know, not say it exactly as I will say it after I've been doing it more, but this book is set at the Bears Ears National Monument. And it's the first time I've ever done a story where Bernie and Chi are actually able to work together. Before, in my earlier books, I think because Bernie had been a sidekick for so long, she was not interested in, she wanted her own story. And whenever I tried to put them together, I would just run into no inspiration. But in this book, they agreed to work together. So that's one thing that makes it different. And the plot involves paleontology in Bears Ears. I think when that area, that's an area in Utah, it's right up at the very northern end of the Navajo Nation border. So there was good reason for my characters to go up there. I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, I realized as I was doing the research that there have been a lot of fabulous dinosaurs and other pre-dinosaurs and early mammals discovered in that area. One of the reasons it got made a national park was because of all the archaeology. So I talk a little bit about the archaeology, but since I'd written about archaeology before, I thought it would be fun to learn something new. So this book has some paleontology in it.
I have a question for you. Did your dad love the Navajo Nation? Because he writes it like he loves the Navajo Nation.
Indeed, he did. I think, for one thing, he loved the scenery. He loved the expansiveness.
Yeah.
He loved the colors of the desert and the wonderful skies. Mm-hmm. I think maybe having grown up in Oklahoma, where everything was a lot cozier and greener and there was more humidity, when he got out to the Navajo Nation, I think it really brought his senses to life. So yeah, he loves the landscape, but he also had a really deep affection for the Navajo people. He loved to tell the story of his first visit to the Navajo Nation. It was right after World War II, and he had a job driving a truckload of oil and gas equipment way out to Crown Point, New Mexico. And when he got there, he noticed some Navajo men and women all dressed up in buckskin and feathers and ceremonial regalia, and the horses were all decked out too. And he said to the guy who was receiving the equipment, I saw all those Indians on horseback. What's going on here? And the guy said, oh, some of the young men, or maybe it was just one young man. Anyway, someone had returned from service in World War II, and their clan is having an enemy way ceremony for them. And my dad was curious, and he asked if he could go. And the guy who received the equipment, he said, well, yeah, sure. Just behave yourself. So anyway, my dad went. And I think partly because he was in the same position as these young Navajo men, having just come back from World War II and trying to find out what was next, trying to, get his balance again. But he often said that the sound of the drums and the chanting, the smell of the cedar and pinon wood in the air, the aroma of the mutton stew and the fry bread and the other ceremonial food, just and the commonality of the people who'd come together, all of that really made a deep, deep impression on him. But he said, even more than that, the wisdom of the Navajo culture in understanding that these young men were going to need some extra attention and some special help to be reintegrated into their community. He said that was really the start of his love affair with the Navajo Nation and with that beautiful landscape that they call sacred.
That's wonderful. Well, we are going to do a book giveaway and also let people know how they're going to reach you. This is the book that we'll be giving away, The Sacred Bridge. Well, we won't be in. It's giving it away. It's on our podcast. That's the only thing we're doing.
You're facilitating it.
Yes, we are facilitating it. Would you like to give them a little idea about The Sacred Bridge without any spoilers?
Sure. I'd be glad to. So The Sacred Bridge is the 7th book in the series, in my taking over the series, or the 25th book in the Jim T. Joe Leaphorn stories. And the Jim Chi story is set at Lake Powell with special attention towards a beautiful landmark called Rainbow Bridge. Chi goes there basically on a pilgrimage after a stressful time. But of course, because he's a detective in a mystery story, he comes across something unexpected, which then moves him through the rest of the story. Meanwhile, Bernadette Manuelito is back in Shiprock, and she gets an assignment that concerns a hemp farm on the Navajo Nation, where things seem to not be going as expected. And what leads her to that, as she goes to see her mom, and as she's coming back, she is a witness to a horrific hit and run accident. And so she's trying to figure out who the victim is of this accident, and that's what motivates her. So I don't want to say too much about it, but I really like this book, and it's set during the right after the severe time of COVID on the Navajo Nation.
Yes.
And I was able to weave that in a little bit in what I think is a humorous way. So
yes, it was very well done. Wait a minute, we've got a comment here. Let's see. Linda Davis Stevens says, marvelous storyteller. We agree. And Chris Chrisman says, it's a special area out there. Loved camping. Yep, we've gone there a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah. We've stayed there often. All right, let's get all of your information up here so people know where to find out more about your books. Her website is annehillerman.com, and that's ANNEHILLERMAN. You can find Anne on Facebook at ann.hillerman. Her email, and I'll leave this one up here because it's pertinent to the book giveaway, is ann@annehillerman.com. Okay, let's get this ticker up there.
And these will be audio books.
Oh, these are going to be audio books?
Yeah. I thought that would be fun.
Okay.
And I wanted to say the woman who is reading these books, her name is Liana Studi, and she is the niece of the actor Wes Studi, who played the Joe Leaphorn character in movies a long time ago that Robert Redford did for the Boston PBS. They were part of the American Mystery Series.
Yes.
So anyway, it was like, I was really happy that she was the one who was selected to do this. And she's been working with a language coach to get good pronunciation of the Navajo words. And her coach is a gentleman named Peter McDonald, who was the former president of the Navajo Nation and also was a code talker. So I feel like the stories are really in good hands with the two of them working on that. So she's also going to be the narrator for The Way of the Bear. So.
All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the first 3 people to email Anne at annehillerman.com will win an audiobook copy of The Sacred Bridge. And I suppose if you don't like audiobooks, that Anne would probably send you an ebook if you requested.
I probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it would be a real treat to be able to hear all the pronunciations and to hear that on an audiobook. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I thought since this is a podcast, it would be nice to do something that had to do with
audio.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, that's really awesome, Anne. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Marjorie is saying, oh, that's an E. I owe Anne an E after leaving it off her name before. Sorry, just feeling really silly today.
Yeah. She's not the first. It's not a problem.
Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to spell Anne, because not every Anne is spelt with an E, but Anne Hillerman is spelt with an E.
Yep.
So don't leave it out or you won't get to her.
That's right.
Right.
Well, Chris Chrisman has sent his email already.
There you go.
Good.
You want that audiobook, you better get cracking, get typing.
Good. Well, I'm not going to check them now because I'm going to just pay attention to them.
No, don't worry about it. They're very patient.
Yeah, we'll check them later. Yeah.
Chris Chrisman's wife's name is Anne without an E.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take our second break now.
Okay.
And when we come back, I'd like to hear more about the Dark Wind.
The AMC special.
The AMC version, yeah. Sure. So let's go ahead and
don't go away, guys. You're just going to have
here
another word from our sponsors.
And go ahead and continue trying to get in on the giveaway, and we'll be right back.
So, you wrote a book. What now? It's time to make the choice between self-publishing and finding a publisher. Texas Sisters Press is a family-owned publishing company. We are also authors and avid readers. We can guide you through the entire process and will make sure your work is treated with the utmost respect. Where to start? Visit TexasSistersPress.com and click on the Submissions tab. Make sure you read the entire page. You'll find out what we can do and what we won't do. If you think we're a good fit for you, it's time to contact us. Texas Sisters Press. Quality books for the family.
Madison Jackson loved being a cop. A young girl is raped and murdered near Burnett Reservoir. Madison vows to get justice for the child. Madison travels to the heart of Mexican cartel country. She is kidnapped, tortured. Will Madison ever make it home? Justice by Kelly Marshall, only at Amazon.com.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Behold, this one about a man, a woman, a black jaguar, and an ancient Maya legend. Two Faces of the Jaguar is a novel by George Dismukes that will take you deep into the jungle and capture your imagination until the last word. Two Faces of the Jaguar is book one of a trilogy. Two Faces of the Jaguar, where only the adventurous dare to read.
Two Faces of the Jaguar, The Lost City, and The Jaguar's Quest are available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Two Faces of the Jaguar, the book people are talking about. Get your copy today.
And we're back.
So you want to talk a little about Dark Winds?
That's what you said.
That's exactly what we would like to do.
Yay!
Can
Yay.
you? How did that come about? As far as them, did they have to work through you on that?
Yeah. My dad had signed a contract years and years ago with Robert Redford, and that was what led to the 3 PBS movies. And then there was a 4th movie, interestingly called Dark Winds, that Redford was not happy with, that was just released on video. So many years go by, and Redford himself was not pleased with the PBS movies, or maybe he was pleased, but they weren't quite what he had hoped. So he and George R.R. Martin, the Game of Thrones author, decided that they would like to revisit Dad's stories, and this time see if they could do a better job. Have native script writers work on the stories, and also hire all native cast, or almost all native cast. Have roles that were being played by Navajos or Apaches actually played by those people instead of other people. So anyway, they approached me and said, what do you think? And I was a little nervous, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's when, these characters had been Dad's characters too. And then the new characters I created had all been living in my head. And I thought, what if they don't do it right? And what if I don't like them? But it's kind of like you send your kid off to high school and you just hope everything goes okay. And I figured, well, Redford and George R.R. Martin both had really good credentials. They were solid guys. And so I said, sure, let's give it a try. So, I signed the contract, and then I basically had nothing. Oh, they sent me an early script, and I read it, and I had never really read a script before. And I think when I read it, I didn't understand how much of what happens, how much of how the way the story is told through the actors' body language, their expression, the pauses between scenes, the switch from one part to another part, visually. Anyway, I wasn't real fond of the script, but I gave them a few tips, which they pretty much ignored. Anyway, then they invited me to go to the premiere, and I was really thrilled and excited. And like I said, a little nervous. I thought, what if I don't like it? I'm going to have to figure out something to say to these actors. But I loved it. I was thrilled with it. So one of the things that I think they really did well was to cast Zan McClendon as Joe Leaphorn.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah, he's just perfect. so excellent in that role. And I love the scenery. I mean, there's a lot of really, really wonderful things about it. The only the criticism that I've heard from it has basically been from those people who have read all of Dad's books many times. The first season, I should backtrack a little. The first season was based on Dark Winds with some references to People of Darkness. Mm-hmm. So even though it's called Dark Wind, not Dark Winds, Listening Woman. It's based on Listening Woman and People of Darkness. So even though they're calling it Dark Winds, it doesn't really have anything to do with the Dark Winds story. Mm-hmm. So that was the first thing that some of these avid fans were upset with. And then, like I said, the fact that they bring Emma Leaphorn back to life, and they also give her a job as a nurse.
Yes, she has a job. I know I liked it.
I did too. Oh, and then the Bernie character. They said, my goodness, in your books, Bernie is 5'2", and she, likes to eat hamburgers and drink Cokes. And in the movie, she's this, svelte, beautiful, model-like, woman. And, this isn't your Bernie. But in fact, the actress who plays Bernie, Jessica Madden, has the Bernie personality down to a T. I think she does a wonderful job. So another thing that was interesting to me, the series is set in the 1970s when Joe Leaphorn is, a vigorous lieutenant, and Bernie. They bring in Bernie Manuelito, who in my mind wasn't even born in 1970. They bring her in as the supervisor of Jim Chi, but it works really well. So I applaud them for it. I think all of the changes make the TV series very, very interesting. And
the first episode we watched. Okay, we watched the first episode of the series, and the first face that you see is Joe Leaphorn, but of course you don't know who it is. You just see that face. And I turned to Rob and I said, that's Joe Leaphorn. I can tell you right now. I don't need to hear anything, because they really nailed it. It's exactly the way your dad wrote Joe Leaphorn and described him. I thought that was great. Yeah. Really great.
They make him a little more spiritual than he is.
Yes.
Than he is in a lot of Dad's books. But in some of the books, particularly the earlier books, that spiritual element is there in Joe. So I think they did fine.
Mm-hmm. I liked it, and I've loved all the books. So, but I understand that when you're doing a movie or a TV series, things are going to be different. The books are always better.
Well, you have a bigger canvas in a book. I mean, I know when Dad first signed the contract with Robert Redford, he was saying, I don't know how they can make these books into movies, because so much of what happens while somebody is driving in the car thinking. And that doesn't make a good movie. Nothing's blowing up, nothing's catching on fire. It's just like, one guy down the highway. So, but I think they did a good job. And they're starting filming the second season this month. And some of it's going to be filmed, maybe all of it, but I know for sure some of it's going to be filmed in New Mexico. There's a movie studio that Tsuki Pueblo has set up in an old casino. They built a new casino, and now they're using this building as a movie studio. And then there's a lot of beautiful outside shots too that they do in New Mexico.
And
I don't want to give anything away, but it was really exciting the way they did it. In the priest character, that's all I'm going to say about it, was really compelling. I really liked it. Yeah, I liked so much about it. Yeah, I'm not going to say anymore, but you should watch it.
I know it's hard to talk about mysteries. Yeah, it's like you want to say, oh, and what about this and what about that? But you really, it's good for people to watch it for themselves. You don't want to spoil the joy of it.
Exactly. Joe Conchel says, Anne, it is inspiring hearing you talk about your experiences, even with your dad being who he was. The idea that you had any doubts about carrying on his characters is oddly comforting to me. LOL. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a lot of doubts. I mean, I think that's kind of endemic to being a writer. And in a way, I think that's what makes us keep trying to get it better and better. I mean, self-doubt is not all bad. I have to say, I think I was harder on myself, and I think I always am harder on myself in any of these books than any of my, I call them beta readers, people who read it before I send it on to New York. I mean, they always find stuff that they say I could do better, but they're never as tough on me as I am on myself. But I think that's how we get better. It's you all as writers can understand this. It's tricky. It's like you have that inner editor who keeps kind of nagging at you, and you have to find something for her to do so you can just get the first draft done. You have to think, no matter how awful she tells you it is, you just, at least for me, I just have to keep going through till I get the story all put down. And then I can listen to her say, this opening is kind of flat, or this was an interesting character here, chapters 1 through 8, and then it just kind of disappears. All of that kind of nitty gritty stuff. It's
which circles
really
back to the question that is always asked: are you a plotter
or a pantser?
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm more like a gardener, I think. It's like I have an idea, like these are things, these are ideas that might work. And this might be a really strong element in the story. And this might be a good setting. But then when you go to the seed catalog and you see all these plants, and then you plant some that like shade, and it turns out they don't want that much shade. And you plant some that are supposed to be heat tolerant, and they move into where the shade was. All of that stuff happens just as part of the creative process. And maybe it happens to people who outline too. But for me, part of the fun is just seeing how the story unfolds as I'm working on it.
Right.
George Dismuke says, self-doubt is not limited to women. Nope, it is not.
Nope, it is not.
Chris Chrisman said, I like Gardner. Yeah, really, the characters drive the story. They're not going to let you do things with them that they don't want to do. I mean, you talked about that with some of your characters earlier, and we've all talked about this on the podcast, how, your characters just are like, okay, we're not going that way. We're going over here.
Yeah.
We planned on going this way, but your characters are like, nope.
Yeah, I was really pleased that this time Bernie and Chi were willing to work together when I was doing the second book. And I thought, now I'm big stuff because I finished a book and I got it published and everything. And so I thought I was in control of it. So I had this idea, and Bernie was just not. Everything I wrote with her was just awful. I could barely stand to work on it. It was so awful. And finally, it dawned on me that the problem was she was done being a sidekick. She needed her own story. So once I decided I had to come up with a really big subplot, either for her or for Jim, and have parallel storylines, then things just flowed. And I mean, I had always heard that characters tell you how to write the story, but indeed it was true.
Yes, it really is true. It's absolutely true. Well, I'm glad Birdie wanted her own story because she's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. And it was funny when I decided that Bernie needed to be in the spotlight, then I realized that Dad had not given her much backstory. So then I had to create her mother. Dad had kind of mentioned her mother, but never used her as a character, and create her sister, Darlene. And I gave her a clan brother at the police station so she'd have a confidant. And it was like here's Bernie, and then here's her whole entourage who had to come with her. I
like her clan brother, and I like seeing her sister progress. I won't give any spoilers about the sister or the mom, but it's really good to see her interacting with all of those things. Life is happening around Bernie, and that's good to be part of her life. And we get to be now. And that's good.
I think that's one kind of major difference between the way I've structured the series versus the way my dad structured it. Maybe because of being a woman, or because of maybe realizing more what it's like to be a professional woman, those kind of domestic things and subplots sort of flow into it a little easier for me than they did for him. Whereas for him, there was, more things blowing up, more talk about guns, that kind of stuff, which doesn't really come naturally to me.
Yeah. That's when we co-write, there is definitely that difference.
No doubt about it.
What was funny, one of the first talks I did, I was at the King's English bookstore in Salt Lake, and I do my little talk, and then the first question is this man stands up and he says, "So you just have to tell me, why was it that every time your dad talked about a gun, he got it wrong?"
Oh.
Ooh,
ouch.
I said, I don't know. And that made me think I have to be really careful talking about guns, because there are people who know, everything I write about, there's people who know more about it than I do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. By every author, there's people who know a hook of a lot more of what you're writing about. Yeah. That's why research is so important.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's then where, I don't know about other writers, but for me, it's always a conflict, researching and just really loving the research, and then learning far more about whatever the subject is than any reader really would want to know. So trimming it back, putting it on a diet.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole first draft, second draft, third draft process, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like Paul Hollis says, by the time you finish editing yourself, before it even goes to the editor, you're really sick of the story now.
Yeah, you wouldn't even want to read it yourself.
You don't want to read it anymore.
It's hard. It's really hard to keep editing it, because your brain says, "Oh, I know what this says." It's hard to force your mind to say, no, you got to read all those words.
Yeah. And we all have to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you the last the question that we ask at the end of the show usually. What kind of advice would you have for a new a person that really wants to be a writer, but really doesn't have hasn't jumped out there and doesn't know exactly where to start?
Gosh, I'd have a lot of advice. I guess my first piece of advice would be to look for books that are kind of like the book you think you want to write, and read them. And read them not just as a reader, but read them for the craft. First of all, look for the best of those books, things that have won prizes, things that maybe have been on the New York Times list, things that are recommended by libraries. And then read them as well as reading for story, read them with an analytical brain, thinking of, what has this author done that makes me love this character? What does this author do with dialogue that brings the story alive? So that would be one thing I would do. And then I would go to writers' conferences, particularly where there are authors who are talking about craft, and listen to experts and pick up tips from them. And also at those conferences, people might be able to make contacts with other authors who then would write endorsements for their books, or with agents who might be willing to represent them when the time comes, or with publishers who might be looking for exactly the kind of book that they're thinking of writing. And I guess my final piece of advice would be, write for love. Do it because it really matters to you. And there's the whole financial part of being a writer, but I think it always works best if you do it because you really have to do it. And you do it and you want it to be your best because it's your book. It's like your child, you really care about it.
It is your child.
It's in your heart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your characters really are your children. They're your creation, and you know who they are. You know how they think. You know how they react. And then when we try to push them into doing things they wouldn't think and wouldn't react to, then they won't do it.
That's right.
Well, Anne, I know you've had a busy day with your other event earlier today, and we appreciate you taking your time tonight to be with us. I know everyone's really enjoyed having you on the show tonight.
Well, thank you. There's nothing I enjoy more than talking about writing. I have to say, I feel so enormously lucky and blessed to be able to do what I do and to kind of reinvent myself in the last half of my life and do something that just brings me such joy. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about myself and to talk about my dad.
Oh, yeah.
You're welcome. Joyce Shelton York says, I look forward to discovering the mystery series your dad created and you put your heart into continuing. How wonderful to carry on his legacy. Now, Joy Shelton York is an author herself, a very wonderful author. And Joy, you really do need to read his books. You will see that he loves the Navajo Nation. He loves the time and the period that he wrote about, and also the scenery. It was great.
Amazing.
Yeah, you got to read them, and then you have to read in stories because he really, really has captured the essence of these people. They are living on, and I, for one, am really thankful. Chris Christman says, "Thanks for a great show, Anne." Joe Conte says, fantastic show. Thank you, Anne. And as always, Robin Joan. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, well, thanks again, audience. Anne. We're going to move you over to the side here and stay right there for a little bit. We'll come back to you. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Next Wednesday, November 9th, right where you're at, Canadian author Tom Stewart, Immortal North, and Under Big-Hearted Skies. November looks pretty cool coming up. After that, on the 16th, we have C.J. Peterson, who's an author and a publisher. And then on the 23rd, right before Thanksgiving, another Canadian author, Doug Gardam.
Oh, he was really wonderful.
Right. And then on the 30th, Jen Braxma is going to be our guest. So we've got a lot of good talent lined up coming up here.
One more comment. Linda Davis Stevens says our local book club will read your novel, and so that's wonderful. Good. I'm glad that they will.
For sure.
And sorry if I didn't get all the comments up, people.
Oh, I think they'll forgive you.
Yeah, I think so too.
So until next time.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DV.com.